I still remember the exact moment I realized my marriage was over. It wasn't when I saw my husband's mistress sitting on my couch. It wasn't when I noticed the divorce papers waiting on the dining table. And it wasn't even when my husband looked me straight in the eyes and told me to pack my bags. It was when my 8-year-old daughter squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mommy, are we in trouble?" That question broke my heart, because I had spent 15 years building a life I thought was safe for her, and in less than 5 minutes, I realized that almost everything I believed about that life had been a lie. My name is Maya Carter. I'm 38 years old. I'm a military officer. And on that particular Friday afternoon, I had just received the biggest promotion of my career. I had been promoted to colonel. I had spent years earning it. Long nights, missed birthdays, months away from home, training exercises, endless evaluations, and more sacrifices than I could ever explain to someone who had never worn the uniform. But that afternoon, none of that mattered, because the first person I wanted to tell wasn't my commanding officer. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't even my closest friend. It was my daughter, Lily. She was 8 years old and had been waiting outside the base with my sister. The moment she saw me walking toward her, she ran into my arms. "Mommy!" I lifted her up and hugged her. She laughed. I laughed. And for the first time in months, I forgot how tired I was. I looked at my sister and smiled. I got it. She immediately understood. Her eyes widened. "No way." I nodded. "I'm a colonel." She hugged me so hard that Lily started laughing between us. I remember thinking, tonight is going to be perfect. I was going home. I was going to surprise my husband. I was going to take Lily out for dinner. Maybe we'd open a bottle of sparkling cider. Maybe we'd order pizza afterward. Maybe Ethan would finally look at me the way he used to. Maybe he'd be proud. At least, that's what I thought. On the drive home, Lily sat beside me in the back seat. She kept asking questions. "Does Colonel mean you're super important now?" I laughed. "Not super important." She thought for a second. "Super, super important?" I smiled. "Maybe a little." Then she asked, "Does that mean you'll be home more?" I didn't answer immediately, because I didn't know. Military promotions don't magically make life easier. Sometimes they make it harder, but I didn't want to disappoint her. So I said, "I'm going to try." She smiled. "Good." Then she leaned against my shoulder, and I watched the houses pass through the window. I had no idea. That was the last peaceful drive I would take as a married woman. When we arrived home, the first thing I noticed was the car. A black SUV I didn't recognize was parked in my driveway. I assumed it was one of Ethan's friends. Then I saw another car, and another. I frowned. "Lily, stay with Aunt Sarah for a minute." She looked confused. "But you said we were going inside." "I know," I smiled. "I just want to check something." I walked toward the front door. It was unlocked. That was strange. Ethan always locked it. I stepped inside and stopped. There was a woman's handbag on my kitchen counter. Not mine. A pair of expensive heels sat beside the stairs. Then I heard laughter from my living room. I slowly walked forward, and that's when I saw them. My husband, Ethan, sitting on my couch beside a woman I'd never seen before. She was beautiful, confident, and completely comfortable, almost like she belonged there. Ethan stood up when he saw me. The woman didn't. She simply crossed her legs and smiled. I looked at Ethan, then at her, then back at him. "Who is she?" He didn't answer. I asked again. "Who is she, Ethan?" Finally, he sighed. "Her name is Vanessa." Vanessa smiled. "Hi, Maya." I felt something cold move through my chest. She knew my name. That meant she wasn't a stranger. She knew exactly who I was, and exactly whose house she was sitting in. I looked at Ethan. "How long?" He looked away. I didn't need him to explain. I already knew. The silence answered for him. Then I noticed the papers. They were sitting neatly on the dining table, a folder, a pen, and a glass of water. Everything had been prepared. I walked toward the table. I opened the folder, divorce papers. My hands didn't shake. That's the part that surprises people. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't crying. I wasn't throwing anything. I was simply quiet. I looked at Ethan. "Is this why you wanted me home?" He nodded. Then he said something I will never forget. "We're done." I looked at Vanessa. She smiled. Then Ethan continued. "I think it's time you moved out." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Moved out?" He nodded. "Yes." He pointed toward the papers. "You can take your personal things." I stared at him. "And where exactly am I supposed to go?" He shrugged. "Your sister's, maybe." Vanessa finally spoke. "You have somewhere to stay." I looked at her. She said it like she was giving me instructions, like she had already decided what would happen to me. I turned back to Ethan. "What about Lily?" His expression changed. "We'll figure out custody." I stared at him. "You brought another woman into our house. And you're talking to me about custody?" He became defensive. "This isn't about her." I looked at Vanessa, then back at him. "Clearly it is." Lily suddenly appeared in the doorway. "Mommy!" I immediately turned around. She looked frightened. She had heard enough. I walked toward her. "It's okay." She looked at Ethan, then Vanessa, then the papers. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" I knelt down. "No, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy just need to talk." She looked at me. "Are we going home?" I smiled. "This is our home." I didn't know how important those words would become. Ethan suddenly laughed. It was a short, uncomfortable laugh. "Maya," I looked at him. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stood up. "What do you mean?" He walked toward me. "You've been gone half the time for years." "I've had to raise Lily." I stared at him. "You mean you've been cheating while I was serving my country?" He didn't answer. Vanessa stood up. "Maya, maybe you should accept that Ethan and I are together now." I looked at her. "Together?" She nodded. "He loves me." I was silent. Then I asked, "Does he?" Ethan looked uncomfortable. Vanessa frowned. I continued, "Because he told me he loved me 3 months ago." She looked at him. He looked away. For the first time, I saw doubt in her face, but she recovered quickly. "People change." I nodded. "They do." Then I picked up the divorce papers. I looked at Ethan. "You want me to sign these?" "Yes." "Tonight?" He nodded. I looked down at the first page, then smiled. "Okay." His face relaxed. He clearly thought he had won. But then I added, "There's just one problem." He frowned. "What?" I placed the papers back on the table. "You're asking me to leave a house that you don't own." Silence. Complete silence. Vanessa looked at Ethan. Ethan stared at me. "What did you just say?" I looked at my daughter, then at the walls around us. The house had been in my family for years. Ethan knew the story. Or at least, he thought he did. "My father bought this house before I met you." Ethan shook his head. "That's not true." I smiled. "Actually, it is." He stepped closer. "The mortgage is in my name." "Your name is on the mortgage." I corrected him. "That doesn't mean you own the property." His face changed. I could see the confusion spreading across it. Vanessa looked nervous. "What are you talking about?" I turned toward her. "I'm talking about the house you're currently sitting in. Belongs to me." Ethan stared at me. "You've lost your mind." "No." I reached into my purse, pulled out a small folder, and placed it on the table. Inside was the original property deed. My name was clearly printed on it. Maya Elizabeth Carter, owner, sole beneficiary. Ethan looked at the document, then at me, then back at the document. His voice became quieter. "You never told me." I smiled. "You never asked." But the truth about the house was only the beginning. Because Ethan hadn't brought Vanessa into my home simply because he wanted a divorce. He had a plan, and I would discover that plan the next morning. A plan involving my house, my savings, my military benefits, and a secret bank account I'd never heard of. The divorce papers weren't designed to end our marriage. They were designed to take everything I had built. And the worst part? Ethan thought I was too busy serving my country to notice. He was wrong, very wrong, because while Ethan had spent the last year planning how to replace me, I had spent the last 15 years learning how to survive situations where everything could go wrong, and now, everything had. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I looked at my husband, then at Vanessa, then at my daughter, and I calmly said, "You're right about one thing, Ethan." He waited. "Our marriage is over." I picked up the divorce papers. "But you're going to be very surprised by what happens next." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was heartbroken, at least not entirely. I was angry, but it wasn't the kind of anger that makes you scream or break things. It was the quiet kind, the kind that makes you sit alone in a dark room and replay every conversation you've had with someone you trusted, every strange phone call, every unexplained charge, every time they came home late, every time you convinced yourself not to ask questions because you wanted to believe the person you loved. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the divorce papers Ethan had left on the table. Then I noticed something. A date. The papers had been prepared almost 3 weeks earlier. 3 weeks. That meant Ethan hadn't suddenly decided our marriage was over. He had been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. Everything looked normal at first. My salary account was there. My savings were there. Then I noticed a notification. New account access detected. I froze. I opened it. There had been a login attempt from a device I didn't recognize. I checked the time. 2 nights earlier, while I had been away on duty. I immediately changed my password. Then another thought hit me. My retirement account. I logged into that too. Nothing had been withdrawn. But there was something strange. A beneficiary had been added. I stared at the screen. The name wasn't mine. It wasn't Lily's. It wasn't my sister Sarah's. It was Vanessa Reed. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Vanessa, the woman sitting in my house, the woman my husband claimed he had just fallen in love with. She had somehow been listed as a beneficiary on an account connected to my financial future. I immediately took screenshots. Then I called my financial advisor. It was almost midnight, but I knew she would answer if she saw my number. She did. "Maya, is everything okay?" I took a breath. "I need you to freeze every change on my accounts." There was silence. "What's happening?" "I think someone has been trying to gain access to my finances." She became serious immediately. "Have you noticed anything unusual?" "Yes." I told her about Vanessa. My advisor went quiet. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "Maya, there's something else." "What?" "There was an attempted transfer from one of your investment accounts last week." "How much?" She told me. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't a small amount. It was enough to change someone's life. I closed my eyes. "Was it approved?" "No." "Who requested it?" She hesitated. "Ethan." I sat completely still. For 15 years, I had trusted this man with my life, and now I was learning that he had been trying to access the money I had earned long before he ever met me. "Can you send me the records?" "Absolutely." "Don't tell him." "I won't." I ended the call. Then I looked toward the hallway. Lily was asleep. I quietly walked to her room. She was curled up beneath her blanket, holding the stuffed rabbit I'd bought her when she was 5. I sat beside her. I watched her sleep, and I made myself a promise. Whatever Ethan had planned, he would not take away her sense of safety, not if I could help it. The next morning, Ethan came downstairs like nothing had happened. He was wearing a blue shirt, the same one I'd bought him for our anniversary. He poured himself coffee. Then he looked at me. "You didn't sign the papers." I was sitting at the kitchen table. "No," he sighed. "Maya, please don't turn this into a war." I almost smiled. "A war?" Yes. He sat across from me. I want this to be peaceful. I looked at him. Then why did you try to transfer my investment money? His face changed, only for a second. But I saw it. What are you talking about? I asked you a question. I don't know what you mean. Someone attempted to move money from my investment account. He stared at me, and your name was attached to the request. He became defensive. You think I would steal from you? I don't think, I said calmly. I know someone tried. He looked away, then he said, maybe it was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't require passwords. He said nothing. I leaned forward. And Vanessa was added as a beneficiary. That was when he stopped pretending. He looked at me. How did you find that out? I didn't answer, because his question told me everything. He knew. Later that morning, Sarah came over. She had been my biggest support since the night before. She walked into the kitchen and hugged me. How are you? I'm okay. She looked at me. You don't have to say that, I smiled. I know. She sat down. I showed her the financial records. She read them carefully, then looked at me. Maya. I know. How long has this been going on? I don't know. Sarah looked toward the hallway. Does Lily know? Not the details. Good. I nodded. Then Sarah asked, what are you going to do? I looked at the papers. I want to know the whole truth. She frowned. What do you mean? I don't want to fight him based on assumptions. I took a breath. I want evidence. Sarah nodded. Then we start with the house. That afternoon, I called the attorney who had handled my father's estate years earlier. His name was Daniel Brooks. He came to my house that evening. I showed him the deed. He examined it carefully. Then he smiled. Maya, your father protected you very well. I frowned. What does that mean? Your father knew Ethan was financially unstable when you married him. I stared at Daniel. How? He had concerns. What kind of concerns? Daniel opened an old file. Your father told me that if anything ever happened to him, the property should remain exclusively yours. I looked at the paperwork. There it was. A clause I had completely forgotten about. The house couldn't be transferred, sold, or used as collateral without my written authorization. Ethan had no legal ownership of it. Daniel looked at me. There's something else. What? Your father also established a trust. I stared at him. A trust? He nodded. One that becomes fully accessible under certain circumstances. What circumstances? Daniel looked at the divorce papers. Divorce isn't enough. He paused. But financial misconduct involving the property, he tapped the file, could trigger additional protections. I felt a strange sense of calm. Ethan had thought the house was his. He had been planning to make me leave. He had probably assumed the divorce would give him access to everything. But my father had planned for something like this long before Ethan ever imagined betraying me. That night, I went through old files, bank statements, property documents, insurance records, tax documents, everything. And then I found something that made me stop. A property tax document from 6 months earlier. There was a second signature, Ethan's. But I had never signed anything authorizing him to modify the property records. I called Daniel immediately. He looked at the document. His expression became serious. Maya. What? This signature shouldn't be here. What does that mean? It means someone may have submitted a document using your identity. My heart started pounding. Forgery. He nodded carefully. We need to verify it. I looked at the paper. Suddenly, everything made sense. The divorce, Vanessa, the attempted money transfer, the house. Ethan hadn't simply wanted me gone. He wanted control, and he had probably believed that once I signed the divorce papers, I would walk away with nothing. The following morning, Ethan approached me again. He placed another document on the table. Just sign this. I looked at it. What is it? A temporary agreement. I read the first page. It stated that I would move out temporarily while the divorce was processed. I looked up. Where? Hotel. For how long? Until everything is settled. I laughed quietly. You want me to leave my own house? You're making this difficult. No. I pushed the document back. You're making a mistake. He leaned closer. You don't understand how this works. I looked directly into his eyes. Actually, Ethan, I understand perfectly. He became frustrated. You've been gone for months at a time. You don't know what happens here. I nodded. You're right. Then I smiled. That's why I'm finally paying attention. His expression hardened. You think your military career makes you untouchable? No. I stood up. I think the law does. He stared at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Vanessa walked into the room. She looked at the document. What happened? Ethan said. She refuses to cooperate. Vanessa looked at me. You should just leave. I turned toward her. Why? She frowned. Because Ethan has chosen me. I smiled. Then congratulations. She looked confused. But I'm not leaving. Her smile disappeared. This is Ethan's house. I shook my head. No. I pointed toward the deed. It's mine. Vanessa looked at Ethan. He didn't say anything. And that was the first moment I realized. She didn't know the whole story. Maybe Ethan hadn't told her. Maybe he had promised her a house that wasn't his. Maybe he had promised her a future built entirely on lies. I looked at her and said quietly, Ask him whose name is on the deed. She turned toward Ethan. Ethan. He remained silent. Her face changed. You said, I know what I said. No. She stepped closer. You said this house was yours. Ethan looked at me, then at her, and for the first time, I watched the two of them realize they had a much bigger problem than me, but I still didn't know the worst part. That evening, Daniel called me. His voice was different, serious. Maya, I found something. What? There's another document. What kind? A loan application. I sat down. Whose loan? Ethan's. Using what as collateral? Daniel paused. Your house. I closed my eyes. When? 3 months ago. 3 months. Before the divorce papers. Before Vanessa moved into the house. Before Ethan told me our marriage was over. He had already tried to borrow against my property, and then Daniel said something that changed everything. The application contains your signature. I opened my eyes. I never signed it. I know. Then who did? Daniel was silent for a moment. We need to find out. I looked across the room, at the framed photograph of my father, the man who had bought this house, the man who had spent years protecting me. And suddenly, I remembered something he told me when I was a teenager. He once said, Never be afraid of the truth, Maya. Be afraid of the person who needs you to avoid it. I finally understood what he meant. Ethan didn't just need me to sign those divorce papers. He needed me to leave. Quickly, quietly, before I discovered what he had already done. And now, I wasn't going anywhere. I looked at the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, then at my husband. For almost 10 years, I had believed I knew the man standing in front of me. Apparently, I had been wrong. My daughter Lily was still holding my hand. She was only 8 years old, but she understood enough to know that something was terribly wrong. Mommy, are we leaving our house? I looked down at her. No, sweetheart. My husband laughed quietly. You're still pretending this is your house? I didn't answer, because for the first time that evening, I wasn't afraid. I was thinking. He had spent months preparing for this moment. He had divorce papers. He had another woman standing beside him. He had apparently convinced himself that I would be too shocked to fight back. But there was one thing he didn't know. The promotion I had received that morning had come with more than a new title. It had changed my entire financial situation, and more importantly, it had given me access to information I hadn't had before. I picked up the divorce papers. I looked at the first page, then the second, then the third. My husband watched me carefully. "Sign them," he said. "Let's make this easy." I slowly placed the papers back on the counter. "You've already decided everything, haven't you?" He shrugged. "There's nothing left to decide." His mistress smiled. I still remember that smile. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't guilty. It was confident, like she had already moved into my life and was simply waiting for me to leave. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You should accept that you've lost." I looked at her, then at my husband, then at Lily, and suddenly, something inside me became completely calm. I had spent years trying to save a marriage that apparently only existed in my mind. I had worked late. I had sacrificed promotions. I had missed opportunities. I had tried to keep our family together because I believed Lily deserved both parents under the same roof. But standing there that night, I realized something. A child doesn't need a perfect family. A child needs a safe one. And I wasn't going to let Lily grow up believing that betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation were normal parts of love. I took a deep breath. "Fine," I said. My husband looked surprised. "Fine?" "Yes." I pushed the divorce papers back toward him. "I'll have my attorney review everything." His expression changed immediately. "You don't have an attorney?" I smiled. "I do now." His face went still, because he knew I wasn't bluffing. Earlier that afternoon, after receiving my promotion, I had been contacted by the legal department connected to my new position. They had offered guidance regarding my finances, housing, and certain legal protections related to my career. I hadn't expected to need that information so soon, but now I was grateful I had listened. My husband stepped closer. "Emma, don't make this difficult." I looked directly into his eyes. "You already made it difficult." He stared at me. I continued. "You just didn't expect me to notice." For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Lily squeezed my hand. "Mommy." I looked down. "Can we go upstairs?" I nodded. "Yes." I picked up her small suitcase. My husband immediately said, "Wait." I stopped. "What?" "You're not taking anything from this house." I turned around slowly. "Anything?" He pointed toward Lily's suitcase. "Your clothes, her clothes, that's it." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because he genuinely believed he had the authority to tell me what I could take from my own home. So I asked one simple question. "Who told you that you owned this house?" He didn't answer. His mistress looked at him, and that tiny glance told me everything. There was something I didn't know, something they were counting on. I walked upstairs with Lily, but instead of packing clothes, I opened the drawer beside my bed. Inside was an old folder. I hadn't looked at it in years. The folder contained the original paperwork from when we bought the house. I opened it. My heart started beating faster, because there it was. My name. Not his. Mine. I read the document twice, then a third time. The house hadn't been purchased the way my husband had always told everyone. It hadn't been a joint purchase. The down payment hadn't come from his family, and his parents hadn't given us the property. The truth was much simpler. I had purchased the house before our marriage. My husband had moved into it afterward. He had spent years calling it our house. But legally, the situation was very different. I sat on the edge of the bed. Lily climbed beside me. "What is it, Mommy?" I looked at her. For the first time that night, I smiled. "Nothing, sweetheart." "Are we okay?" I wrapped my arm around her. "Yes." Then I whispered the words that would change everything. "We're going to be more than okay." Downstairs, I could hear my husband talking. He sounded confident again. He thought he had won. He had no idea what I had just found. I closed the folder. Tomorrow morning, I would call an attorney. And I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to fight my husband with anger. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to destroy his life. I was going to let the truth do it for me. Because sometimes the strongest answer isn't revenge. It's documentation, and I had just found mine. I barely slept that night. Not because I was afraid of losing my husband. That part had already happened. I couldn't lose someone who had willingly chosen another life. What kept me awake was the realization that the man I had trusted for nearly a decade had been planning this for much longer than I had imagined. At around 6 a.m, I quietly got out of bed. Lily was sleeping beside me. I looked at her for a moment before walking downstairs. My husband was gone. So was his mistress. But the divorce papers were still sitting on the kitchen counter. I picked them up and put them into the folder with the house documents. Then I made a phone call. "Good morning. I need to speak with an attorney as soon as possible." The woman on the other end asked what the matter was. I took a breath. "My husband has filed for divorce. He says the house belongs to him and intends to force me and my daughter out." There was a pause. Then she asked, "Do you have documentation proving ownership?" I looked at the folder in my hands. "Yes." "Bring everything you have." "I will." I hung up. For the first time in months, I felt like I had something solid beneath my feet. But I knew the house wasn't the only thing I needed to protect. My daughter was my priority. I made breakfast for Lily, packed her lunch, and drove her to school. On the way there, she was unusually quiet. Finally, she asked, "Mommy, is Daddy mad at us?" I glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "No, sweetheart." She looked down. "Then why did he say we have to leave?" I didn't know how to explain betrayal to an 8-year-old, so I told her the simplest truth I could. Sometimes adults make decisions that hurt other people. "Did you do something wrong?" My heart broke a little. "No." "Did I?" "Absolutely not." She stared out the window, then she said something I'll never forget. "Then why does it feel like we're the ones being punished?" I had no answer, so I reached back and held her hand at the next red light. "You're not being punished." I squeezed her fingers. "And I'm going to make sure you always know that." After dropping her at school, I drove straight to the attorney's office. I spent nearly 2 hours explaining everything. The marriage, the house, the divorce papers, my husband's affair, and finally the documents I had found. The attorney carefully examined them. She looked at me. "Emma, where did you get this?" "It was in my original home purchase file." She nodded slowly. "This is important." "How important?" She placed the document on the table. "Very." I waited. She explained that the paperwork appeared to establish my ownership interest in the property before the marriage, but she needed to verify the title history and financial records before making any definitive conclusion. Then she asked me something unexpected. "Did your husband contribute to the mortgage?" "Yes." "How much?" I gave her the information I remembered. She wrote it down. "And did he ever tell you that he was the sole owner?" I laughed quietly. "Not just me. He told everyone." She looked at me. "That's interesting." "Why?" "Because if he has been representing himself as the owner while preparing documents to remove you from the property, we need to understand exactly what he has been doing." That sentence stayed with me. Exactly what he has been doing. I suddenly remembered something, a conversation from 3 months earlier. My husband had asked me to sign some papers. He told me they were related to refinancing. I had been exhausted that night. I told him I'd look at them later. He became irritated. "You don't trust me?" I had laughed. "Of course I trust you. Now I wished I hadn't said that." I looked at my attorney. I might have copies. "Find them." I went home that afternoon and searched everywhere. Desk drawers, closets, old tax files, bank statements, insurance paperwork. Then, near the back of a cabinet, I found a small envelope. Inside were photocopies. My hands started shaking. The papers weren't refinancing documents. They were property-related forms. And there was something else. A document with my signature, or at least what looked like my signature. I stared at it. I knew immediately. I had never signed that document. I took a photograph of every page and sent them to my attorney. She called me less than 10 minutes later. "Emma, don't confront him." My stomach tightened. Why? Because if this is what it appears to be, we need to handle it carefully. I sat down. What do you think he did? I don't want to speculate until we verify everything. Her voice became serious. But keep every document exactly where it is. Don't alter anything. Don't throw anything away. I promised her I wouldn't. That evening, my husband came home. He walked through the front door as though nothing had happened. No apology, no explanation. He simply placed his keys on the table. "We need to talk." I looked up from the kitchen. "About what?" "The house." I said nothing. He continued. "My attorney says you're going to make this complicated." I almost smiled. "Your attorney already knows?" "Yes." "So you've been planning this?" He frowned. "Planning what?" "This." I pointed toward the divorce papers. "The divorce, the house, everything." He sighed. "Emma, stop acting like a victim." That sentence changed something inside me. Not anger, clarity. I had spent years trying to convince this man that I deserved respect. I wasn't going to do it anymore. "I won't sign anything tonight." His jaw tightened. "You don't have a choice." I looked at him. "Yes, I do." He stepped closer. "You really think you can fight me?" "I don't need to fight you." I paused. "I just need to tell the truth." He stared at me. For the first time, I saw fear behind his eyes. It lasted only a second, but I saw it. Then he walked away. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close. Then I opened my laptop. There was one thing I needed to check, our joint financial account. I logged in, and my stomach dropped. There were several transfers I didn't recognize, small amounts at first, then larger ones. Over the previous 6 months, thousands of dollars had been moved into an account I didn't know. The account wasn't in my name, and it wasn't in Lily's name. I took screenshots. Then I called my attorney. She answered immediately. "I found something." "What?" "Money has been transferred from our joint account." "How much?" I told her. She went quiet. Then she said, "Emma, this is no longer just about the house." I knew exactly what she meant. There was a much bigger plan. My husband hadn't simply decided to leave me. He had been preparing his exit, and he had apparently been moving money before telling me anything. But there was still one question I couldn't answer. Who was the account for? The next morning, my attorney sent me a message. "We found the account holder." I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. "It's your husband's mistress." I felt completely numb. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe properly. Not because I was surprised he had betrayed me. I already knew that. What shocked me was the amount. He hadn't simply given her gifts. He had been transferring family money to her, money that could have paid Lily's school expenses, money that could have covered our mortgage, money that belonged to the life I had spent years building. I sat alone at the kitchen table. Then I heard the front door open. My husband walked inside. He looked at me. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I turned on the lamp. "Where were you?" "At work." I nodded. Then I asked, "Do you know where our money has been going?" His expression changed, only slightly, but enough. "What are you talking about?" I slid a printed bank statement across the table. He looked at it, then back at me. His face had gone pale. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him. I simply said, "Explain this." He stared at the statement, and for the first time since this entire nightmare began, he had absolutely nothing to say. For several seconds, my husband just stared at the bank statement. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask what I was talking about. He simply looked at the numbers as if they had betrayed him. Finally, he said, "Those transfers aren't what you think." I almost smiled. "Then tell me what they are." He pulled out a chair and sat down. "They were temporary." "Temporary?" "Yes, I was going to put the money back." "When?" He didn't answer. I pushed the statement toward him. 6 months, Daniel. You moved money from our account for 6 months." He looked irritated now. You're acting like I stole something. I stared at him. Did you? He stood up. You don't understand how finances work. I understand enough to know that I didn't authorize those transfers. His face hardened. Maybe you should have paid more attention. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because it was true. Because I had spent years paying attention. I had paid the bills. I had handled Lily's school expenses. I had managed the house. I had supported his career when he wanted to take risks. And while I was doing all of that, he had apparently been building another life behind my back. I stood up. You're right. He looked surprised. I should have paid more attention. I picked up the statement. But now I am. He said nothing. I walked upstairs and closed the bedroom door. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. But I reminded myself of something my attorney had told me. Don't react emotionally. Document everything. So I opened my laptop. I created a folder. I named it Everything. Inside, I saved copies of every bank statement, every message, every property document, every email, and every photograph. Then I started going through our old financial records. And that's when I found something even stranger. There was a payment made almost a year earlier. It wasn't large, but the description caught my attention. It was a payment to a legal office. I didn't recognize the name. I searched through my emails. Nothing. Then I searched Daniel's old messages that were still synchronized to our shared tablet. I wasn't looking for private conversations. I was looking for financial records. But one email appeared. It was from the same law office. The subject line was Property Transfer. Final Documents. My heart stopped. I opened it. The email was dated 11 months earlier, almost a year before Daniel had handed me divorce papers. The message contained an attachment. I opened it. It was a draft agreement concerning the house. According to the document, Daniel had been attempting to establish himself as the sole owner. But there was a problem. My signature appeared on one of the pages. Again. A signature I had never written. I immediately sent the document to my attorney. She called me within minutes. Emma, I need you to listen carefully. I am. Do not tell Daniel what you found. Why? Because we need to preserve the evidence. I leaned back in my chair. Do you think he forged my signature? I can't make that determination myself, but the document raises serious questions that need to be investigated. I looked at the screen. 11 months. He had been preparing this for almost a year, maybe longer. I suddenly remembered all the strange questions he had asked me. What would happen if we separated? Would I be willing to move? Would I ever sell the house? Would I consider putting the property in his name because it would make refinancing easier? At the time, I thought they were ordinary questions. Now they look completely different. He hadn't been planning a divorce. He had been planning an exit strategy, and he wanted to make sure I had nothing left when he walked away. That evening, Daniel came into the room. Are you going to keep ignoring me? I closed my laptop. I've been busy. With what? Work. He laughed. Your new promotion has really changed you. I looked at him. No. I paused. It just made me realize how much I had been putting aside. He didn't understand what I meant, and I wasn't going to explain. He walked toward the closet. You need to start packing. I turned around. Excuse me? My attorney says we should separate immediately. I stayed calm. Then your attorney can speak to mine. He froze. You hired an attorney? Yes. His expression changed. When? Yesterday. He stared at me. You're actually going through with this? I almost couldn't believe what he had said. You gave me divorce papers. That doesn't mean you have to make a war out of it. I don't want a war. I looked directly at him. I want the truth. He shook his head. You've always been dramatic. I didn't respond. Because I knew something he didn't. The evidence was already being reviewed. And the next morning, my attorney called. Emma, we need to meet. I drove to her office. She had several folders on the table. She pushed one toward me. "We've reviewed the property records." I opened it. "The house is still legally registered in your name." I exhaled slowly. "And the document Daniel showed you?" "That's exactly what concerns us." She pointed to the page with my signature. "We're going to have the signature examined." I nodded. Then she opened another folder. "This is the financial information." I looked at it. "The transfers to the other account are significant." "How significant?" she told me. I felt sick. It was enough money to make a major difference in Lily's future. My attorney continued. "There is something else." "What?" "Several of these transfers occurred shortly before Daniel made major purchases." "What kind of purchases?" "Luxury items, travel, payments to another residence." "Another residence?" I looked up. "Another house?" She nodded. My husband hadn't just been planning to leave. He had apparently been preparing a new life, a new home, a new relationship, using money from the family we had built together. I sat there silently. Then my attorney said, "There's one more thing you should know." "What?" "The woman he's been seeing appears to have known about the property situation." I felt a strange calm come over me. So she knew. Maybe they both knew. Maybe they had spent months believing I was completely unaware. My attorney closed the folder. "Emma, what do you want?" I thought about it. A few months earlier, I would have said I wanted my marriage back. That woman was gone. Now I wanted something different. "I want Lily to be protected." My attorney nodded. "And?" "I want everything that belongs to me." "And?" I looked at her. "I want the truth on record." She smiled slightly. "Then that's what we'll work toward." That afternoon, I picked Lily up from school. She ran toward me with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. "Mommy," I smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." She hugged me. Then she looked at my face. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Yes." She studied me for a moment. "You look different." I laughed softly. "Different how?" "Like you're not scared anymore." I hugged her tighter. Maybe she was right. I wasn't scared anymore. I was tired. I was disappointed. I was hurt. But I wasn't scared. That night, Daniel came home later than usual. He walked into the kitchen and said, "We need to talk." I looked up from the table. "I agree." He sat down. "I want to make this simple." "So do I." "I'll keep the house." I said nothing. "You'll take Lily and find somewhere else." I looked at him. "And what exactly do you think will happen?" He leaned back. "You'll sign the papers." I calmly opened my folder. Then I placed one document on the table. His eyes moved to it. I watched the color disappear from his face. It was the original property document, the one showing that the house had been mine before our marriage. He stared at it, then looked at me. "Where did you get that?" I answered quietly. "It was always mine." He didn't speak. I placed another document beside it, the financial records, then another, the suspicious property transfer document, and finally the bank statements. Daniel looked at the papers one by one. His confidence disappeared. For the first time since he had handed me those divorce papers, he looked like the man who was afraid of losing everything. I folded my hands on the table. "I told you I wanted the truth." He swallowed. "And now," I said, "we're finally going to have it." My husband stared at the documents spread across the table. For the first time since this nightmare began, Ethan had nothing to say. He picked up the property document, read it, then read it again. "You've been hiding this from me." I shook my head. "No. I didn't hide anything. You simply never cared enough to look." He dropped the paper onto the table. "You're trying to trap me." "No." I looked at him calmly. "You trapped yourself." He stood up. "You think some old paperwork is going to change everything?" I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my phone. "I think the bank records might." His face changed. I continued. "And the property documents." His jaw tightened. "And the signature examination." He froze. "What signature examination?" I looked directly at him. The signature on the property transfer. He stared at me. You had it examined? Not yet. I paused, but my attorney has already sent it to a forensic document examiner. For several seconds, Ethan didn't move. Then he laughed nervously. You're bluffing. No. You wouldn't do that to me. I smiled sadly. Ethan, you already did something far worse to yourself. He walked toward the kitchen counter. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand exactly what I'm doing. You could destroy my career. I looked at him. Your career? He nodded. You know what my position means. I stood up. You mean my promotion? He said nothing. You're worried about what happens if people discover what you've done. His voice became quiet. I never wanted this. I looked at him. You wanted Vanessa. You wanted my money. You wanted my house. You wanted me to disappear quietly. I pointed toward the divorce papers. You planned all of this. He looked down. Then he said something I never expected. I was scared. I frowned. Of what? Of being nothing. I stared at him. He continued. Your career kept growing. You became more successful. People respected you. And He stopped. You felt left behind. I shook my head. So you decided to destroy me instead of fixing yourself. He looked away. I didn't think it would go this far. I almost laughed. You didn't think? That was your problem. The next morning my attorney called. Maya, we have the preliminary report. I closed my eyes. And? There are significant inconsistencies between your verified signatures and the signature on the property document. I felt my heart beat faster. Meaning, the examiner believes the signature requires further investigation. I sat down. Can it be proven? If the full examination confirms what the preliminary analysis suggests, yes. I looked toward the window. For months I had wondered whether I was imagining things. Now, I had evidence. My attorney continued. There is also another issue. What? We traced the account receiving the money. I already knew. Vanessa? Yes. I closed my eyes. How much? She gave me the figure. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't just money from our joint account. There were transfers from an account connected to the house, money that had been used as part of the property expenses. Ethan had been moving money around, then trying to make it look like I was financially irresponsible. He hadn't just been stealing. He had been creating a story where I looked like the problem. I whispered, he wanted to make me look unstable. Yes. My attorney's voice became serious. And there's one more thing. What? He contacted a realtor. For the house? Yes. When? 2 weeks ago. I stared at the wall. 2 weeks ago, before he gave me the divorce papers. He had already planned to sell my house. He probably thought once I signed, he could do whatever he wanted. I suddenly understood why he had been so desperate to make me leave quickly. He didn't just want freedom. He wanted control of the property. That afternoon, Ethan came home. He looked exhausted, but he was still pretending everything could be fixed. Maya. I looked at him. What? Can we talk without lawyers? I nodded. Go ahead. He sat down. I want to apologize. I waited. I made mistakes. That isn't an apology. He looked at me. I'm sorry. For what? He hesitated. For Vanessa. And? For the money. And? He looked down. For the house. I nodded. And for the documents? He became silent. That silence was enough. I didn't need him to confess. I already had the evidence. I stood up. Our marriage is over. He looked at me. I know. But Lily and I are staying in this house. He nodded slowly. I understand. And from now on, everything goes through our attorneys. He looked defeated. Then he asked, Is there any chance you could forgive me? I thought about it. I can forgive you. His eyes lifted. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. He nodded. I understand. For the first time, I believed him. 3 weeks later, the forensic report arrived. I sat in my attorney's office while she opened the envelope. She read the report silently, then looked at me. The examiner found the signature was not consistent with your verified handwriting. I exhaled. What happens now? That depends on what you want to do. I looked at the report. For a moment, I thought about revenge, about exposing Ethan publicly, about making everyone know what he had done. Then I thought about Lily. I didn't want her childhood defined by her father's mistakes. So I said, I want everything handled legally. My attorney nodded. That's the right decision. The divorce process took months. There were arguments. There were negotiations. There were financial reviews. There were questions Ethan couldn't answer. And eventually, the truth became impossible to hide. The property remained mine. The suspicious financial transfers were accounted for. The attempted property transfer was invalidated, and Ethan lost the control he had spent months trying to obtain. Vanessa left him shortly afterward. Apparently, she had believed she was getting a new life with him. When she discovered the truth, she wanted nothing to do with him. I never celebrated that. I didn't need to. My victory wasn't seeing Ethan lose. My victory was realizing I no longer needed him to win. 6 months later, I stood in front of a mirror wearing my new uniform. Colonel, the promotion I had received on the same day my marriage collapsed. I looked at myself, and for the first time, I didn't see a woman who had lost her marriage. I saw a woman who had survived it. Lily walked into the room. Mommy! I turned around. She smiled. You look pretty. I laughed. Thank you. She hugged me. Then she asked, What? Are we still living here? I looked around our home. Yes, she smiled. Good. Then she took my hand. Come on. Where? I made breakfast. I laughed. You made breakfast? She nodded proudly. Mostly. I helped. I followed her downstairs, and as I walked into the kitchen, I realized something. This house didn't feel like the place where my marriage had ended anymore. It felt like home. Not because the walls had changed, because I had, and that was the real ending to my story. My husband thought he was sending me away. He thought he could take my house, my money, my future. He thought my silence meant weakness. He was wrong. My silence was simply the moment. I stopped arguing and started collecting the truth.